Part 35. Success is rewarded. Failure is punished. This is fair. Bai Xuelan asked again. What exactly are you thinking about? Xuan Huaifeng asked impatiently, frowning and said. Didn't you already say it? How many times do you want to ask? Bai Xuelan said, Don't lie to me. Xuan Huaifeng said, Why did I hide it from you? Bai Xuelan said, If you didn't hide it from me, why did you just look down? Xuan Huaifeng thought about it carefully, and sure enough, his eyes kept hanging down, staring straight at the floor. He couldn't help but smile. Stretched out his hand and gently pushed Bai Xuelan, who was close to his face, and stood up and said, Two big men, don't you feel embarrassed to say these little things? It's better to practice guns in a serious manner. Do my best, I must hit 10 rings today. Bai Xuelan also followed him, stepping out of the room and asking, You've fired all 4 boxes full of bullets. So I guess you can hit several 10 rings? A box is 100 rounds. Xuan Huaifeng thought about it for a while, and didn't want to take the big one, so he said conservatively. There are always 2 or 30. Bai Xuelan said, How about we set a goal? 30 is not necessary, only 20 of you are counted. You've fired all 4 boxes of bullets, and if you can hit 20 or 10 rings, I will reward you. Xuan Huaifeng said, Alright, you should have a goal before you know how to advance or retreat. Bai Xuelan continued, Since there is a reward, there must also be a penalty. If you can't achieve it, then I will punish you. The word penalty came out of his light-colored and elegant lips, and it was this kind of leisurely attitude. Without an awkward and spine-tingling feeling, Xuan Huaifeng subconsciously felt his cheeks get hot, but he would never admit what he thought of, let alone let Bai Xuelan know that he was aware of the meaning of the word. Thinking about the box that I shot yesterday, at least 30 hits 10 rings. Today, I have 4 boxes. I can't guarantee anything else. 20 is a guaranteed shot. Simply being generous, nodding with a calm face, success is rewarded, failure is punished, this is fair. As he spoke, he stepped forward and walked to the front. When we got to the big garden, everything was ready. There was a row of new targets in the distance, and a line was drawn on the ground. It should be a standard line. Next to it was a set of French-style white tables and chairs, with simple rose patterns carved on the backs of the chairs. A large sunshade was inserted diagonally. On the left of the table stood Song Ren and 2 guards with pistols, and on the right there were 2 servants standing with their hands lowered. Seeing the 2 people approaching one after the other, Song Ren almost stood at attention and gave a military salute again, raised his hand to his head, suddenly remembered that the commander had said no, and hurriedly swung with his fingers and grabbed a handful on his head, turned the action into a head scratching. Xuan Huaifeng happened to walk in front of him, looked carefully, couldn't help laughing, and said, You are very clever. As soon as Song Ren arrived at the mansion, before seeing Xuan Huaifeng, he had long admiration for Xuan Huaifeng. No matter the housekeeper, the ordinary servant, or the former group of guards, as long as the adjutant Xuan is mentioned, there must be an ambiguous look that dare not say much. And the words flicker when talking about him. In the dimness of Song Ren, the idea that this person has a special position in the mansion is unfathomable and is difficult to serve. But seeing the real person, it is not the case. Seeing Xuan Huaifeng compliment him, he also smiled, seeing that the 2 of them had a good relationship with each other. Bai Xuelan came over and asked indifferently, Is it all done? Song Ren replied, Chief, it's all done. Bai Xuelan gave an and looked at Song Ren. He glanced coldly at the corner of his right eye with his black eyes, so that only Song Ren could see it. Song Ren knew that it was for him to avoid it. Report good things and leave immediately. Bai Xuelan turned around with a smile. Let's start quickly. I'll see how many 10 rings you can play. Xuan Huaifeng didn't even know that this person just ate a dish of useless vinegar. And said with a smile, "You can do whatever you want. Counting. However, you said that there will be rewards. If I win, can I ask for the prize?" Bai Xuelan laughed. "Are you sure you won? Why don't you ask how you will be punished if you lose? Talk to him. Walk over and bow his head, pressing bullets on the magazine with all his heart." Bai Xuelan came over and stood side by side with him, also bowing his head, only watching his slender and beautiful fingertips move rhythmically. Not like preparing a murder weapon, but more like playing the piano, then staring at that strange and moving white and flexible. It seems that he does not know that his eyes are extremely deterrent. Xuan Huaifeng loaded 2 magazines, suddenly raised his eyes and glared. "Are you cheating like this?" Bai Xuelan smiled and said, "What happened to me?" Xuan Huaifeng said, "It's such a trivial matter. Can you fight psychological warfare with me? Don't bother, just stare harder, I'm not afraid." With a click, he clipped the magazine. Holding the gun, he walked to the road marked on the ground, stood up, raised his hand to his shoulders, calmed down, and pulled the trigger. Boom! Startled, the birds on the tree fled in panic. Xuan Huaifeng saw the results on the target clearly, turned his head, and his black jade-like eyes glanced at Bai Xuelan lightly. "How?" "I said I'm not afraid of you." With a very flattering youthful pride, a slight smile escaped from the corners of his lips, which was unbearable. Such an intimate, unrestrained and vivid. "I am afraid that it was only given to Lin Qijun in the past." Xuan Huaifeng himself may not have noticed it, but Bai Xuelan immediately noticed it. A warm spring rain made Bai Xuelan wet from head to toe. Another small part of reason reminded not to scare away the little white rabbit who was approaching him, hiding his emotions on his face. Calmly saying, "It's just the first shot, that's all. Get complacent? Wait until you reach 20 or 10 rings." Xuan Huaifeng said, "The first shot is already 10 rings, and there are 399 bullets left. So I can't hit 19? It's not good to look down on people like this." He raised the gun and slammed it again. 1 shot. This time, he only hit the 9 rings. He didn't speak, tried another shot. And it turned out to be 8 rings. The 2 magazines were fired in a row, and the guards were asked to pick up the target and take a closer look. The right spot in the middle was the 10 rings of the first shot, and the other 8 and 9 rings. Most of them are 9 rings, and one of them is very close to the 10 rings, almost only a line away. But after all, it is not even the 10 rings. Bai Xuelan knew that he was thin-skinned, his face was flat, and he didn't show any pride and didn't make a comment. However, Xuan Huaifeng understood that this person must be secretly laughing in his stomach, not showing his face, which is more hateful than laughing directly. But if he loses his temper and speaks ruthlessly, he will lose his demeanor, so silently went to reload again. This time, I loaded 6 magazines in one go, took them all, put them on the grass beside my feet, and used them at any time. He picked a second new target, bang, 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 for a while, and finished the 2 clips. Knowing that this round might be bad again, he felt a little uncomfortable, and he didn't ask the guards to pick the target. He bent down and picked up a magazine from the ground, replaced it, and pulled the trigger again without saying a word. The deafening gunshots in the mansion followed one after another, and the servants probably knew that it was gun practice. There was a high wall outside the mansion, and a few passers-by who occasionally passed by were frightened and terrified. After the 6 magazines were fired, before the guards could send the target over to check, Xuan Huaifeng turned his head again, went to the table to reload the bullets, loaded 2 or 3 magazines, turned around and asked, "What the hell is this? What's going on?" Bai Xuelan said, "Are you asking me?" Xuan Huaifeng said, Aren't you my master? Bai Xuelan looked him up and down. That's right. But why are you picking on us? Come to ask for advice when you have a gambling appointment? Besides, I have never heard you call me master. Although Xuan Huaifeng was stubborn and arrogant, he never only cared about his face when he was seeking knowledge. Hearing the words, he called out, Master. He asked Bai Xuelan, I called. Are you willing to give me your money? Bai Xuelan couldn't help but take a step closer. His eyes were soft, and he said in a low voice, I didn't listen carefully just now, please call me again. It's better to add a good word in front. Xuan Huaifeng sniffed the domineering aura on him. His handsome face was slightly warm, and he felt a little funny again, and said, Good master. Bai Xuelan responded with a mixture of pride and sweetness. Xuan Huaifeng said, You answered this, if you can't teach something, then you will smash the signboard. Bai Xuelan's brows suddenly raised. Oh, no. How can I smell the danger of inviting the monarch into the urn? Yes. A smile emerged from the corners of his mouth. He took Xuan Huaifeng's browning, weighed it very lightly and skillfully in his hand, and said, You shoot today, it's not as good as yesterday. Xuan Huaifeng said, Why not? It's just for this reason. Ask me, what's the reason? Bai Xuelan said, You're such a smart person, why haven't you heard that haste is not enough? No matter what, it's not good if you have too much desire to win or lose. Because you only want to hit 10 rings, the eyes will look hard at the target, but the result is always unable to hit 10 rings. Xuan Huaifeng said, That's right. Bai Xuelan said, You're making a big mistake like this. Unpredictably, he looked at Xuan Huaifeng and smiled. Xuan Huaifeng was even more puzzled, and asked after him, Why is it wrong? You pull the trigger only after you have identified the target. Isn't that what you said? Can't you just look at the target seriously and beat it all at once? Bai Xuelan raised a stick. His fingers twitched in front of his eyes, and he said, The target is to recognize, but in order of priority, first recognize with the heart, then with the hand, and then with the eye. On the side of the body, the left hand raised the gun, and there was no need to walk to the marked road, just on the spot, facing the target far away. Didn't seem to pay much attention, flicked the wrist, shot a few times, and emptied the magazine. The guard hurried to pick the target and came over. Xuan Huaifeng's face froze when he saw it. There is only 9 rings, and the bullseye of the 10 rings has a hole all over it. Bai Xuelan showed no color, his expression was calm. He unloaded the magazine, jammed it, and replaced it with a full magazine, and asked him, Do you understand? Xuan Huaifeng asked Bai Xuelan for advice. The 3 recognitions just now, please explain in detail. Bai Xuelan said, Truthful confession is to identify the bull's eye in your heart. Keep your mind, don't think about what you have and don't think about if you lose now. What am I doing to you at night? Seeing Xuan Huaifeng stunned, his face flushed red, he hurriedly said seriously, Come on, it's the hand recognition, that is. The hand feel, the shooting. The hand feeling. It is extremely important that if you can hit the bullseye with one shot, you don't need to look at the target. The feeling of the hand will tell you first. The eyes only recognize the target, but the hand is precisely controlling the direction of the muzzle. There is no feeling, no matter how good the eyes are. No matter how clearly you can see the target, it's useless. Finally, he woke up Xuan Huaifeng and said, You practiced well yesterday, and you have taken care of your heart and your eyes. Today, you are in a hurry to hit 10 rings, and you have all the strength. It's all in the eyes, but the heart and the hands are not taken care of, so naturally you didn't play as well as yesterday. We Chinese people do things unintentionally, and it's just right, so it's very suitable for this place. You can think about it yourself. Xuan Huaifeng's dissatisfaction with being molested just now was put aside. and he suddenly realized, yes, that's exactly it. I was thinking about how to aim just now, but I ignored the word hand. Bai Xuelan looked at him. He looked like he wanted to tease him, so he deliberately sighed and said, if you realize this, if you practice for a few more days, I'm afraid you should be full of teachers. I can't teach you any tricks anymore. I want to hear from you and call me again in the future. Good master. That is impossible. Xuan Huaifeng said sternly, what are you talking about? I am a teacher for one day and a father for life. If I am full of teachers, I will never forget you. Bai Xuelan's expression moved slightly, and said again, let me practice as you said. He took the pistol from Bai Xuelan's hand, returned to the original place, stood up, took a deep breath, and shot a gun. It turned out to be really 10 rings. Xuan Huaifeng was naturally very happy. He turned around and said to Bai Xuelan, it's really a master. Tomorrow, you are not the head of customs. It's also very good to be a spearman. Bai Xuelan was also secretly surprised. Things are easier said than done, and most people understand the truth. But it is easier said than done if you have to practice your heart and eyes. On the contrary, Xuan Hui is gentle, but he was born with a gun. It seems that Commander Xuan's little bit of commander's courage has turned into a talent in marksmanship and passed it on to him as a single seedling. After a clip is finished, there are 3 10 rings, and the others are also very close to 9 rings. Xuan Huaifeng's confidence increased greatly. While loading bullets, he told Bai Xuelan about his experience. This gun practice is the same as reading, so you have to focus on it. The pressure is less. Although he knew that there was still a promise of reward and punishment, after all, he was more calm than before. Xuan Huaifeng actually felt more at ease with a shot than a shot. He enjoyed the deafening sound of gunfire and the feeling that the tiger's mouth was faintly numb from the recoil. Not long after changing a few more clips, 10 rings came out, including the first 4, a total of 19. Just as he was about to continue, he suddenly saw a man approaching from the stone gate. It turned out that Adjutant's son came back after finishing his work outside, and when he came to Bai Xuelan, he called out, Chief. Xuan Huaifeng turned his face to the side and smiled at him. He also nodded to Xuan Huaifeng and smiled. Bai Xuelan asked, how are things going? Xuan Huaifeng knew that Adjutant's son had gone to Bai Yunfei's house to send money, so he could not help hanging his hand with the gun, and also waited to listen. Unexpectedly, Adjutant's son's answer had nothing to do with this, and said in a businesslike tone. The subordinate went to the police station in person, and Director Zhou received it personally, saying that they used the most capable people and interrogated for many days. The gangsters have already recruited all the gangsters. They are all from the Henan gang who came in from outside. They are so poor that they are like eating leopard guts. I heard that the chief of customs has money, so they put their ideas on the chief. They bought a person from the General Administration of Customs and asked on the route where the general manager usually goes to the General Administration office. He was ambushed like this. The person who confessed to the General Administration of Customs was a small clerk in the finance department, and he had also been arrested. During the interrogation, he recognized everything. Bai Xuelan non-committal, he asked, did you say how to deal with it? Adjutant's son said, Director Zhou's original words, this is a heinous crime. And it is impossible not to be executed. It will be dealt with as soon as possible. Xuan Huaifeng frowned slightly. When he got up, Bai Xuelan saw that Xuan Huaifeng seemed to want to speak. So he stopped, and asked Adjutant's son, what do you think? Adjutant's son thought for a while, and sent the guards and escorts around a bit farther, and took a step forward. Then he said, Chief, I saw that the police department is not very authentic. It is obviously perfunctory. A few rogues can't do such a big thing. If you are thinking about getting money, you shouldn't be red-eyed at first sight. Shooting, there is no life. Who wants money? I'm afraid it is those outside the street who are not afraid of death. And a lot of money has bought director Joe. Bai Xuelan's mouth showed a chilling smile. What kind of fun can someone with the surname Joe have? Okay. Wait for me to clean up one by one. Adjutant Sun said. According to the commander's order, the captured gangsters have been brought here. Can the commander see you now? Bai Xuelan said. You asked for someone, but the police department didn't stop you. Adjutant Sun said. Chief, if you ask for someone, the police department always wants to save face. But they said that the prisoner in this important case can only be brought with you. 3 hours after I came out. After 3 hours. The police department wanted someone to come to the door and said that they would be sent back to the prison for strict supervision. I saw that the 3 gangsters were cold-eyed. And they were very difficult to deal with. The police department is probably sure about this. Time can't ask anything before giving this empty favor. Bai Xuelan smiled. This problem is interesting. You brought it all here. I will ask for it myself, just to relieve the boredom. Stretching, sitting under the French-style very romantic sun umbrella, he said to Xuan Huaifeng. If you don't practice today, you will win. We will discuss what to reward you later. Go ahead and do your own thing. Xuan Huaifeng said, this is official business. Why are you planning to let me go? Bai Xuelan said, wait a minute to interrogate the prisoner. I'm afraid you won't like it. Xuan Huai said with a straight face. If you order this because of the confidentiality of the matter, then I will leave now. If it's just because I don't like it, you think I will show my cowardice and lose my prestige? Don't trust me? This kind of care, for me, is an insult. Bai Xuelan smiled helplessly. Okay, I am unfounded. Adjutant Xuan, please stay. Just, wait a minute and see something unpleasant. But don't argue with me again. Xuan Huaifeng said, Chief, don't worry. He put his gun down and stood behind Bai Xuelan with his hands down. Not long after, Adjutant Sun had turned back and reported, Chief, the prisoners are brought here. Several guards escorted the 3 prisoners and brought them to Bai Xuelan, with a spear to their heads. Bai Xuelan smiled and said, don't be so fierce, take the gun away. He waved his hand gently. The guards withdrew their spears, still hanging from their shoulders. The 3 prisoners are very strong, and they probably had some grappling when they were arrested. Their clothes were all tattered, with a few big holes hanging from hooks. They stayed in the cell of the police department for a while. On his face and arms, there were streaks of blue-purple wounds, and it was unknown who had been beaten. In particular, one of the men with dangling eyebrows, medium stature, but with a very reckless expression, knelt down and raised his neck. Seeing Bai Xuelan looking at him, he also turned his eyes to Bai Xuelan. Like a dead pig not afraid of being scalded by boiling water. The other 2 half-deadly bowed their heads, resigned to their fate, but they didn't show any signs of timidity. Bai Xuelan took a few glances, and knew that these were the sharp characters picked out of the strongmen, who broke a few bones without saying a word. No wonder they sent them over. He smiled again, looked away from the 3 of them, and turned around to ask Xuan Huaifeng, I have eaten a lot of porridge these days, and my mouth is pale. After a while for dinner. I would like to order something tasty? Xuan Huaifeng was stunned for a moment, wondering if you would hurry up to interrogate, how do you think about dinner? I didn't understand when I heard Bai Xuelan instruct the housekeeper, didn't you hire a new Sichuan cook? You call him over. And I will order him a dish. The cook was suddenly called by the chief to meet him, and he was very nervous. As he approached, he rubbed and rubbed his hands on the large apron and asked with a smile, "Chief, do you have any orders?" Bai Xuelan asked, "Spicy eel, can you do it?" The cook hurriedly said, "Yes." Bai Xuelan asked, "Do you have an eel?" The cook nodded, "Yes." "Yes." Bai Xuelan asked, "Live?" He couldn't help laughing, "Of course it's alive." Bai Xuelan laughed too, took 10 yuan from his pocket and gave it to him, "Take it. You can get some good eels now. And I'll see you clean up with my own eyes. I'll make spicy eel at night." The cook had just entered the mansion a few days ago, and he suddenly received such a large amount of money as a reward. And he was suddenly top-heavy, even his forehead glowed with joy, and repeatedly said, "This is what we do, this is what we do." Rubbing the large gray apron, he walked away without touching the ground. For a moment, carrying a wooden bucket in one hand, a wooden board and some small tools in the other, trotting over, panting, putting the things down, swooping and scooping them out of the bucket, grabbing a lively eel, and handing it over. In front of Bai Xuelan, "Chief, you see, the thumb is thick and unequivocal." Bai Xuelan hummed, and said, "Clean the bones." The cook said, "You have 100 hearts." He can enter the White Mansion was an errand, so of course there were 2 hands under his hands. And he was good at showing it in front of the chief, so he couldn't help but have a bit of a show-like aura. When it fell, the eel almost stopped moving. "That plank is for eels." The cook picked up a nail, hit the head of the eel, and nailed it to the wooden board. The small sharp knife swept along the eel's body without much force, and the intestines came out. The knife was pulled again, and the spine was intact. He picked it out, cut the eel meat into 3 pieces, and threw it into the sea bowl. He threw the remaining eel head under the trough, and then picked up a live one from the bucket. After a set of martial arts, it is not sloppy, and it is really neat. Even Bai Xuelan praised. "Okay." The cook got the compliment and became even more energetic. He peeled off a few strips in a row, scooping the bucket until only water was left, rubbing his hands on the apron and asking, "Chief, it's all ready. Or, I'll make it fresh for you now." Bai Xuelan glanced down, looking at the bloody wooden board. The spikes longer than fingers were stuck on the board. The corners of his lips lifted slightly. "No hurry. There are a few more. Use your time to help me open them." After speaking, he pointed at the prisoner who was kneeling on the ground. When the cook looked back, he couldn't help but be stunned, and said nonchalantly, "Chief, don't make fun of the little ones. How can this be done?" Bai Xuelan smiled calmly. "What's the problem? Which part of their body is it? Like an eel, you can start whichever section you want." Although he smiled handsomely, the cook saw his heart palpitate and shuddered suddenly, only to realize that he was not joking, and his face was as white as paper. After a while, he cried and said, "Chief, I can't do it." Bai Xuelan smiled and said, "You can't even do your old job, so aren't you useless?" The guard next to him brushes it up, takes the gun up, and rests it on the cook's head. The cook, who had never seen such a battle in his life, thumped his knees and fell to his knees, trembling all over. Bai Xuelan asked, "What? Can it be done, or can't it be done?" The cook was sweating profusely, gritted his teeth, and nodded. "Clever." Bai Xuelan said gently, "By the way, your 2-handed intestines and deboning thing is very interesting. Don't panic and lose all your work. Open the skin and remember the core they pee in. Take it out for me and make it whole. If it breaks, I will be unhappy. You don't want to make me unhappy, right?" The cook nodded after a long while in despair. Bai Xuelan said, "Come one by one, let's do this. Open this first." The guard looked at his gesture, and immediately pulled the prisoner who had raised his eyebrows and dared to look back at him from the ground. The faces of the 3 prisoners had long been blue, and their hearts shrank when they saw him stretch out his fingers. The dangling eyebrows were originally calm and arrogant. But now that he knew that something was wrong, he struggled desperately and shouted, "You can't do this. We are prisoners of the police department. We won't be lynched by you." Bai Xuelan waited for him to shout a few times. Then he asked in a leisurely manner, "Do you know what you did?" The prisoner said, "Yes. I am so poor that I decided to tie your ticket." Bai Xuelan picked up the tea and took a sip, then said, "Is there no mastermind behind this?" The prisoner was stubborn, and said with a stubborn neck, "No." Bai Xuelan asked, "Do you know that kidnapping is a capital crime? You will be shot." The prisoner raised his face, "I'm not afraid of death." Bai Xuelan couldn't help showing a smile, and said interestingly, "That's right, sooner or later, you will be shot." "Is there something down there, and how big of a deal is it?" "Anyway, there is something down there. The trousers are covered, so you won't be able to see it when you go to the execution ground." Then he raised his chin slightly, which was an order. Several guards came up and knocked the shouting prisoner to the ground with the butt of a gun, and they were going to strip his pants. Seeing that Xuan Huaifeng's eyes were round, Bai Xuelan stopped them and said, "You guys are too uncivilized. Go and find a place with a tile to cover your head." The guards responded loudly, pulled the scolding and struggling prisoner up, and dragged him to the next wing regardless of his shouting. Another man with a long spear led the cook to clean up the wooden knife and went over. Bai Xuelan winked at Adjutant Sun, and Adjutant Sun said, "I'll go over and supervise." He followed suit. Others remain where they are. Bai Xuelan let the remaining two prisoners kneel and asked the servant to bring 2 cups of hot tea, then turned to Xuan Huaifeng and said, "Are you tired after standing for so long? Sit down. Drink some tea with me, and wait. Let's have dinner." Just as Xuan Huaifeng was about to shake his head, a heart-piercing scream entered his ear, but his heart skipped a beat. Raised his eyes slightly and looked at Bai Xuelan. Bai Xuelan acted like no one else. Hearing the screams like wild beasts from the side room, he drank the tea lightly, took a piece of sweet-scented osmanthus cake from the plate, tasted it, it seemed too sweet, and put it down. Instead, he grabbed a handful of red-skinned peanuts, ate a few, peeled a few more, rubbed off the red skin, and handed the peanut kernels to Xuan Huaifeng. Xuan Huaifeng saw that he was holding a few white peanut kernels in his palm and brought them under his nose. He just glanced at them and didn't pick them up. Bai Xuelan asked, "Are you angry?" Xuan Huaifeng thought for a while and shook his head. Bai Xuelan asked again, "Are you afraid?" Xuan Huaifeng shook his head again. Bai Xuelan sighed, "Then why are you so dissatisfied again?" Xuan Huaifeng didn't want to say anything, but Bai Xuelan kept staring at him with dark eyes, so he couldn't take it anymore, so he had to say, "I just think what you came up with is really bad." "You are really bad." Bai Xuelan smiled bitterly. "Did you think of me as a good person before? My title is a bad person, it was already decided by you. Besides, I have never denied this title." He tilted his head and poured several peanut kernels in his palm into his mouth, chewing with gnashing teeth. At this time, there was already movement in the wing room. When Adjutant Sun came back, the 2 guards behind him grabbed the prisoner's left and right armpits, dragged the prisoner out of a bloody path on the ground, and threw it on the ground. The man had already passed out, lying like a dead fish, blood dripping out from his crotch. The cook also followed behind, as if stepping on cotton, with blood on his hands and apron. Bai Xuelan asked lazily, "Why did it take so long?" The cook was already very afraid of Bai Xuelan. His fat face shuddered, and he said with trepidation, "This is my first." "Slow. Take it slow. Where are the cores that were picked out?" The cook took a step forward and showed Bai Xuelan something. Xuan Huaifeng glanced across the table, bloody, and when he remembered what it was, he felt disgusted and couldn't help but look away. However, Bai Xuelan asked, "Why does it look like a dog bite? There are bumps and pits, and the incisions are uneven. I don't think you can make it home." Bai Xuelan said, "It doesn't matter, 1 time it's raw and 2 times it's cooked, and the remaining 2, you have to take care of it for me." Well, that's it. As if shopping for vegetables, he randomly picked one of the remaining 2. The guards went over to drag people. The 2 prisoners could not have imagined that Bai Xuelan's methods were so pungent. When they heard the screams of their companions just now, they were trembling with fear. And now they saw Bai Xuelan's finger pointing lightly again, almost falling softly. They weren't cowards either. If they were shot, they didn't care at all. But before they died, they had to be a eunuch again in a tragic way, and they would suffer a great sin. Those from the National Police Agency, no matter how they interrogated them, insisted that they were kidnapping tickets for money. After 3 hours, the National Police Agency came to woo people. It was just a fart. The dangling eyebrows were the most horrific among them. And they were all dealt with, so what good fruit would they have if they held on? As soon as the guard's hand touched some clothes, the prisoner shouted as if he had been stabbed by a knife. "I'm not the mastermind. I'm not the mastermind." Bai Xuelan laughed. "You Henan gang don't even want your life for money, I always knew. It's just that you shouldn't be blind and provoke me." Bai Xuelan, if you want to kidnap the ticket, don't ask which line of Master Pai's family is in. Just drag it down and drive. The prisoner was forced by guards. He dragged his way to the wing, struggling and shouting back, "I'm not from the Henan gang. The head of the Huayan gang asked us to do it. He brought 300 gold bars. He also promised, which brother would do it for this?" After the incident, he sent 50 gold bars to everyone's home. Anyway, we were arrested, and sooner or later we would die. We only gritted our teeth to keep our family safe. What I said is true. It is true. A hoarse voice snarled. Bai Xuelan heard it almost, and nodded slightly to Adjutant Sun. Adjutant Sun called the guards to stop first, turned around, and asked the last one left, "What about you? Are you the mastermind or someone instigated?" The head said, "Yes, it's Boss Joe who asked us to do this. I'm really blind." Adjutant Sun went to see what Bai Xuelan meant. Bai Xuelan yawned. "I'm tired, you can continue. There are still more than 2 hours, enough for you to ask carefully." Adjutant Sun responded, and ordered the guards to detain the 2 prisoners separately. He asked one by one individually, so as to avoid collusion. When these people were gone, Bai Xuelan immediately commanded again and called the remaining big guard next to him. "Hey, don't stand stupidly. Hurry up and clean up the wound under the prisoner, the blood is drained. And the person is dead." The police department came to the door and asked someone to give us something. The guard said, "Yes," and squatted down to peel off the prisoner's pants and bandage his wound. Although Xuan Huaifeng felt uncomfortable, he couldn't help but glanced at it, and when he saw it, he found that blood was coming out from the root of his thigh. And the flesh on both sides had been slashed several times. The thing that should have been peeled and cored was still there. Xuan Huaifeng was stunned for a while, and was stunned, only to realize that he was staring at someone else's place, and quickly turned his eyes to look at Bai Xuelan. Bai Xuelan sipped the tea slowly and asked him, "Now, am I still a bad guy?" Xuan Huaifeng asked, "What's going on? Why did he scream so pitifully just now?" Bai Xuelan smiled and said, "Where did he call? Those few calls were from Adjutant Sun. You can recognize it if you listen carefully. When they dragged this man in, they knocked him unconscious. But Adjutant Sun did a good job, the crotch was bloody. He even gave the cook a disgusting piece of meat, which seemed to be the case." "Oh, The cook must have been frightened by him twice, and it was fun to tremble. Xuan Huaifeng wondered, when did you make an appointment with Adjutant's son? I didn't know. Bai Xuelan said, no appointment, just a momentary wink. If it wasn't to play tricks, what would his adjutant have to supervise this kind of scene? And he also understood, the police department will come to ask for someone in a while. And it is not very easy to explain if you are really castrated. Xuan Huaifeng said, he is really smart. Bai Xuelan nodded, that's right. If he's not smart and doesn't know how to look at me, why should he be my adjutant? To Bai Xuelan. I'm not competent. Not only are you not smart, but you can't understand one of my eyes. Bai Xuelan leaned his head over and laughed softly, that's not what you said. The two lieutenants are responsible for their own affairs. And the lieutenant's son is responsible for watching me. What about you? You are responsible for giving me a look. Xuan Huaifeng didn't expect him to suddenly say such a sentence. But after thinking about it carefully, it was very vivid, and he couldn't help but smile. Bai Xuelan took the opportunity to say, it's getting late, let the kitchen put dinner in my room. Let's eat it together. Xuan Huaifeng stood up and warned, there is no spicy eel dish tonight. Bai Xuelan teased and asked, since I'm not allowed to eat spicy eel, what else do you use to feed me? Xuan Huaifeng picked up the pistol on the table and raised it handsomely. Hey, you two guns, do you want it? With a cheerful smile, he turned and walked away. Bai Xuelan quickly chased after him.